Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, C5. Welcome. So very excited. Today marks the first of our finale series for Bridging the Gap. So you guys have been with us for the whole semester now, and we've heard from so many alum that have done a fantastic job at sharing their tips and tricks and industry secrets or experiences of being out in the field. So we'll have 4 final parts to this kind of like design interview challenges series, and we're so happy to kick it off with Lauren and Leah. So they're both senior product designers at Cruise. Lauren coming from our program and Leah coming from the MFA in Interaction Design, if you guys caught that 2-year program. So just a little bit of background on both. For Lauren, she's, like I said, senior product designer at Cruise, designing for the future of mobility. She's volunteered with Hack Mental Health and Glide and design and UX consulting roles, and believes in technology's potential for good as an advocate for tech ethics, diversity, and community resilience. Like I said, Leah, also senior product designer, came from the MFA 2-year interaction design program at CCA and was previously at Facebook. So we're so excited to have them walk us through some design interview tips and tricks and guidelines today. And with that, I'll hand it over to you two. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Tess. Cool. Yeah. Let's get started. We're going to talk all things design interviews. So this is a bit of a guide to help you guys know what to expect, and also just different tips for what interviewers might be looking for, or just ways to really nail the interview. Cool. Just a quick intro. Tess already gave a wonderful intro to both of us, but just a little bit more, I guess, background into each of what we've done in the past. Started out as an industrial designer, worked in the innovation consulting space for a little bit while at Smart Design and Gravity Tank, CCA IXD program, like you guys are doing, and then worked in healthcare for a while, designing robotic surgery tools at Intuitive, and now at Cruise. So throughout this whole process, I've been, interviewing people and also doing a bunch of interviews myself. I've done 25 interviews this year at Cruise. So yeah, it's just excited to talk to you guys about just tips and tricks and things I've learned along the way.
Hello. Yeah, so just a little more about me. I come from an urban planning background, not necessarily like digital design. So for the people whose backgrounds are not traditionally the type of thing that you'd slide into interaction or UX design with, don't worry, it's great. You're bringing skills to the table that are super useful and rare in the industry and important. Okay, so in terms of interviewing, I did a ton of interviewing at Facebook, and I haven't done nearly as much at Cruise as Lauren, but it's a very similar process. And yeah, I guess we're going to talk about that next. Thanks, Lauren.
Awesome. Cool. Just a quick overview of the agenda for today. So we'd like to go through the 3 kind of main chunks of the interviewing process. So the first being like, what do you do to stand out? So this has to do with like applying somewhere and someone looking at your portfolio and your website and having an about me, whether it's on your LinkedIn or you're going to a networking event, and just like talking about yourself in general. And the next looks at interview screening. So it's, kind of getting the on-site interview. So it's showing a preview of your work, a work screen, stuff like that. And then the last part is the actual interview itself, usually on-site. During COVID, probably not on site, but there are different kind of facets to what you would normally do in a full-blown interview, and we'll go over those too. And so before we get started, just really quickly, I have my chat open. I'm hoping this will work. I just would love if people could just type in the chat, like out of the things I just mentioned or anything beyond that, maybe just type really quickly, like what you really came here to learn or what you'd like to learn. And I just like to get a read on that, and then we can maybe focus more on those things throughout the presentation. Everything beyond part 1. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Tess and folks did mention that you guys did a little bit of an about me exercise. So we're not going to do that here, but we're going to look at some examples and then talk about kind of what's working well and not working well for each one. Awesome. Yeah, design exercises. We have a breakout session that is going to be talking. We're going to actually practice and do a collaborative exercise, and we have a ton of tips and tricks for that. So that's going to be a big part. Yep. Maxime, oh, we'll cover it. So I guess it might be a different perspective. So we're still covering the about me stuff. Awesome. Interview timelines. Cool. Yeah, we can go over that too. We'll save time at the end for Q&A as well, so you guys can ask whatever you want. Awesome. This was great. Thanks for typing this out. Sweet. Let's get started. So we are going to start with the standing out part. So two parts to this. So one is your portfolio or website, or the work that people go to look at to really decide if they want to take the next step with you and do the phone screen and then get into interviewing. So laid out here kind of at a high level, the different parts that we look for in the work that a designer has. And I'm going to go through each of these sections in a little bit more detail. And I will say that at different phases of the process, so whether you're like trying to get the interview, you have a work screen, or you're giving a presentation on site, it's the same stuff. You just need to go more in depth on all of them. So this is kind of revisited in each section, but I'm going to go over it more in depth here. So the first is end-to-end process. So the stuff we're looking for here, research. So, is there evidence that you've talked to people and you've understood the problems through talking to them? Problem definition, have you taken that research and organized it in a way that makes sense to start going into the design phase? So an example of that is this here. And so you've got, the user types listed out, and then like who, the needs, the problem. So some kind of framework to help you move into the design phase. User research. Oh, I mentioned that one. I guess that's listed twice. Sketches or low fidelity work. So do not just jump straight into final designs or final solutions. So sketches, but also low fidelity mocks like the stuff that you see here. Iteration, brainstorming, are you not just presenting one solution? What did you try along the way, and why did you choose one over the other? And then I guess the last thing, if you did research and you found things out and you discovered user needs, making sure that that's tied to the outcome, and you kind of bring that back in at the end when you explain your solution. The next is thinking about more like broad UX stuff. So a lot of this has to do with mapping. So, it's flow charts. So like looking at stuff down here, like what are the steps and the flows and decisions the user has to make along the way? So these can be pretty low fidelity. Also, journey maps. So this up here is an example of a journey map. This is also pretty low fidelity journey map. It could be more or less visual. Information architecture diagrams. So that's stuff in here. So, if it is more of a redesign of an entire application, how do you think about organizing the application? And so, mapping that out and showing that. And also you've got some like flow charts and diagramming of wireframes down here too. And next, getting into, I put these two together because they're related. So motion, I would say, is in both of these categories, but the first is interaction design. So how are you using patterns? Do you use like when the user needs to like click and see the details on something? If it's like a web app, do you use a modal, or do you use like a detail panel that slides out? And why would you choose one over the other? So for example, the reason why you might choose a detail panel that slides out, because the user still wants the context of what's on the screen. And so a modal would cover that. So that's an example. And then motion. So screens are not static. You don't click from one screen to the next. How does a screen transition from one to the next? And what is that motion within there? And then also visual design leans more on, I'm calling this like craft. So this is a little bit more about, okay, you've kind of got the patterns right, and I can see that things kind of move and how I'd expect screen to screen, but how things move and the visual style and cohesion of the application is more of the craft part. Is it easy to find what I need on the screen? The call to actions are called out very clearly, and the kind of style is consistent and cohesive. The next is product thinking. This one is a little bit hard as students, just because you're not working in a real company that has real business needs and business goals and measuring things. But I'll go over like what I'd look for somebody who maybe has this experience. And I think even if you haven't had that experience with shipping a product and a project in your portfolio, you can still talk to these things. So one is product market fit. So one part of that is just, is there a big enough market? Are you designing for, a really super niche user and other super niche use case? So, making sure that it feels like there's a big enough market for this, or explaining the market. And then there are relevant needs that are solved for. So yeah, again, making sure that the need feels like viable, and that, yeah, like a lot of people would need this, the need seems right, seems there. The next is just business viability. Like, what would it take to make this? And one thing we think about is like effort versus impact. If you're thinking about making, I don't know, a new like way to make Airbnb and book homes, like, one feature could be doing this virtual VR experience where every home you can like put on a headset and like see the home. Like that would be cool, but like that would take a lot of effort to have somebody like go map every home and like, do the VR experience. So that's just something to consider in the final product, is like effort versus like the impact of like how much, I guess, like bookings you would gain from that. Yeah, and then I guess the last involves more like a commonly used phrase is like KPI, so key performance indicator. So depending on the product or what you're designing, finding some way to like quantify or quantitatively be able to, qualitatively, the text is wrong, either quantitatively or qualitatively show impact. So I think for you guys it could be like sharing a user quote, and internally sometimes it's like measuring stuff like how many bookings were made. So you could show it either way. Cool. I'm going to keep going just in interest of time. And I guess there was a question in the chat. Let's see here. Oh, what's the difference between quantifiable and quantitative? So I meant qualitative and quantitative. I put that text wrong. So quantitative is like measuring something like how many bookings, and qualitative is stuff like a user quote saying that something was great for some reason. Cool. So the next for the About Me is actually, I don't know which one of you is doing this, but Tess or Purva or Shervin, whoever has the magical PDF they can send out now.
Yeah,
we have, okay, awesome. We have a PDF with a bunch of examples of About Me's that people have written that I just pulled from LinkedIn. And I'd love to take a little bit of time just to read through these. And we're going to talk about, so here are the examples. You're going to get the PDF, you can read through them. And then we're going to come back and talk about them. What patterns and observations do you see? Are there common components that you see between them? And then what stuff do you feel like is working well or not working well? So I'll give you guys.
That in, sorry. Oh yeah, I threw it in the Slack. So it's there when you guys are ready.
Perfect. Awesome. I'll give maybe like a 3 to 5 minute pause and you guys can go ahead and read them. Give you guys one more minute. Cool. Maybe if we could come back and talk about things that we saw. Yeah, what did you guys notice? What was working well, not working well? What are some patterns you saw?
I guess there was some with a lot of jargon in it. So the ones that were more simplified, I guess, stood out a little more.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. There were some that maybe got a little wordy. Yep, go ahead.
Adding on to that, I think the jargon makes it really just template because I mean, all of them looked very similar to me without any of them really standing out in a way that it used the same words, and it's the set 10 words that are used in just different places and in different sentences.
Mm-hmm. What are some of those words that you saw that were repeated?
Human-centered
design. What are some
design,
of those patterns? Mm-hmm.
Human-centered design, storytelling, UX, service systems. I understand why they're of course necessary because the algorithm picks those up when somebody is searching for them, or like when you're recruiting. But like in an about me, and I would want to know that from you. Does it not work if it's personalized a little bit more than just these terms?
Yeah, so I do think personality is awesome, and I think personality can come through in a lot of different ways. Personality can come through. I think there was the one that was like always open to a coffee chat. And, if you read through that one, everything was very kind of like lighthearted throughout the whole about me, and so I kind of get this sense of their personality. There was another one that was like super short, that was like portfolio here, and I can imagine that I know that person personally, but I can imagine that person is very concise. And very considerate, and there's no fluff, nothing extra that they're going to give you. So I think personality can come through in a lot of ways, and you guys can choose how you want to show that. I do think using some of those words like human-centered design, UX, storytelling, whatever it is, some of them are needed. I think there are a lot of different flavors of designers. So you can see in one example, one guy is totally into service design. There are other people who, and that's what gets him excited. He loves thinking about the business and the service design and that part of things. And if that's the part of design that excites you and you're passionate about, you should include that because, that's the kind of job that you would want. So I wouldn't include every buzzword just to include every buzzword, but the parts of design that you love and are excited about, I would try and include. Yep. Anything else? Other thoughts? Or Leah, anything you want to add?
I've seen a couple where they just put those in bullet points, like the buzzwords, and spend the rest of the paragraphs on the personality part. And I really do think your personality makes you stand out because people skim so many of these a day. If you can cram as much of your personality as possible into anything that you're presenting to people, that's great. If you're an introvert, me too. I don't know how to do it, but like, that's all.
Anything else?
None of these say anything about them outside of design, like even just a little bit.
Yep.
There's no indication of that. All of these are like kind of, I do design and then this and this and that, and I'm good at this. I was like, okay, but like people do have a life outside of design, and those experiences matter because that's what you bring into your work. So
but to that point, I was just thinking, sorry, but with building on that was there's one that starts with I combine my love for experimenting with emerging technologies. And so I thought that was a creative way of just starting with like what you like and tying it into design. So I really like that. And even the toolbox is a creative way of kind of like compartmentalizing all the buzzwords, but just the ones you need for to highlight your skills. So those just stood out.
Yeah, that's really great. And also, I think those things work well, like you just said, and also to the comment right before you. Yeah, I think like infusing, if something else in your life is super important or like a driving factor about you that maybe might influence your work. I know there's a leader at Cruise in design who, is super, all about climate change and is like devoted and said, every job I have from here on out is going to in some way, contribute to combating climate change. And so that's included in her bio and her about me because that's really important to her. So, whether it's something like that or whether it's about like the creative expression of, I don't know, something else in your life that you do. Yeah, I think tying that in some way could be nice. Yeah. I don't think we had a lot of examples of that in here, but I think that could be cool.
I have a question.
Yep, go for it.
Can I ask now or should I keep it for later?
You can ask it now.
I want to know how important is this about me section, because I notice like a lot of about me's that I see on LinkedIn or that all of us write as designers, they almost sound the same. I understand that people do try to put in some amount of flavor, but eventually everything sounds so templatized. When a person's recruiting, do they really read through this and do they really filter through an about me section, or is there more?
Yeah, that's why I guess like advice I would give for about me is just to keep it short and sweet. I think for the most part, it's your work that really gets you the job and kind of speaks for itself. But, I think people do look at the about me's. They don't want to read a novel, but they look at it to, in some ways, like see how you communicate. Like, can they be concise in saying like, this is who I am, this is what I like, and, what's important to you, personality, stuff like that. Like, can you be concise and communicate that in a short way? So it's kind of with that, I listed up here the different components that I saw as patterns in those about me's. So past experience, specialties, passion, superpower, what's your concentration? What do you love about design? And then personality, which like I said, can be conveyed in a lot of ways, skills, and then links to work. So you don't need all of these. It probably should be some combination of these. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's your work that really, really matters. But I do think people read the about me's and they look for, clarity and communication as part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just going to move on for interest of time, but we'll have Q&A at the end. So Leah is going to take over the next section.
Hello. Okay. So talking about, so you got a screen, they noticed you, your about section worked. So now you're going to talk to recruiting. And if we can just, thank you. Sorry, Lauren's still controlling the slides. I feel bad telling you what to do. Okay. So what to expect for a recruiting call. This is typically really quick. So sometimes they'll do a screening call that's like a whole 45 minutes. If you were referred, like you could skip this part of the process, but typically this is just them. This is sort of your about me, but verbally. This is them getting a feel for you, how you express yourself, the cadences of how you speak. This is your opportunity to reinforce that one thing you need them to know about you. So recruiters will think of you as, oh yeah, that person who's really into climate change or something like that. So this is a good opportunity to reinforce that. And then also a good opportunity for you to ask some questions about the job and the company, because sometimes the stuff that shows up in the job description is not exactly what's going on. You can hear more about the role if they say, oh, we need a unicorn that does everything. Like, what are they actually looking for? Do they need someone who's visual? Do they need someone who can step into some product shoes? Things like that. So it's just, you get a better feel of what's going on. And that's also when you can ask those questions. If there's something important to you about your future life at a company, that is good. Like, how did they handle this pandemic and taking care of people is maybe a question that you could ask and learn more about how they value people versus productivity, just stuff like that. And we can go on to the next one. Thank you. So for recruiting, what we are looking for, but what like any hiring person is looking for. So as people at Cruise hiring people, there's there's the alignment of role needs, candidate goals, and candidate background. So again, that whole thing about like, we're looking for a unicorn, but really we want someone who's a visual wizard and who understands how branding applies to, I don't know, our customer facing app that we're building. There's that. There's also, you know, you told them what you were into, what you wanted, the type of role you were looking for, and the type of experience you've had in the past. So it's just trying to make sure that it's a good fit on those two things so that we know how to move forward and what to dig into a little bit more. This is also just, again, digging into what people are sharing. Like, is the way you come across, was it edited on LinkedIn by someone else, for example? Like, did someone else do all that and it sounds really buttoned up and put together, and then you get them on the phone and all of a sudden it's, you know, not going as well. Or, you know, maybe this is the opportunity to wow them. Like, that about me section sounded like everyone else's, but when you really get talking to them, their brain is a steel trap full of creative, awesome design. And then I think the excitement and energy part is really important. So like that you are excited about a role. You may be doing this is actually really hard. You may be doing this for like 80 roles, but like bringing that excitement to the table, bringing the energy, being able to muster that and like put your best foot forward for people matters, because it shows that you're just as invested in that process as they are invested in hiring you. And if we can just go to the next one. Thanks. Okay, so the work screen, once you've shown that you are awesome and that they should talk to you more, the work screen is typically a 45-minute phone call with a designer. So you're not talking to the recruiter anymore, you're talking to a designer. And this is the interview that I have done most in my life. And you just want to do 5 minutes. So this is, again, like why the About Me section can be helpful. It's not just for your LinkedIn, it's also so you have like 3 sentences to be like, here's my entire history, here's what I'm into, here's sort of like the types of stuff I'm going to show you, and here's a fun fact about me, like stuff like that. And then again, like Lauren was saying, the work is the most important part. So you spend 35 minutes going through your work. So if you have this on your portfolio website, it's still a good idea to make a presentation, like a separate presentation, because the way a person goes through your portfolio website or through like a PDF is going to be really different for maybe the story that you want to tell. And there are also probably more specific examples or like things that you'll want to highlight during this. And then typically I've seen people do 1 or 2 projects. 2 is great, that highlight 2 separate skills that you're pretty good at. So like people typically pick a more visual or system focused project. And then they'll also pick one in which they had to do like a lot of product thinking or research or like consensus driving. That seems to be like a pretty good balance for a product design role. It depends on the role, but for a product design role, that's kind of what we look for. And then, yeah, so sometimes they'll also do a product critique, which is basically like if you were critiquing work in class, you would just be doing this, but on some app that already exists. So sometimes they'll have one picked out for you already, and sometimes you'll have to pick one. So have a couple in mind, I guess, that you're comfortable enough with that you could explain to another person that you haven't built. That's not like something that your friend built that's super niche, like something semi-public, but not like Yelp, which is one that a lot of people who are not at Yelp tend to use for this critique. Does that make sense? Is everyone good so far? Okay, great. Let's keep moving on. Thank you. Okay, so for the work screen, this goes back to what Lauren was talking about earlier. We're looking at that end-to-end process. Like, did you do the research? If this is like a portfolio project that you're doing that isn't for an actual company, you should still do research and use those insights to drive outcomes, because then you can take that thread of what you learned and tie it into every step of the process. So like, you know, we learned this, and even if it's kind of made up and it's like not like a huge mind-blowing insight that you would like stake your career on, it's still interesting that you learned something and that you could turn that into a solution and then measure your success against that finding. So that problem definition step, really important, but also don't spend too much time on it. Like keep it short, like just grab the insight, say you did it, do that mapping, tell us what you learned, and then get into how that influenced the work. That can be really helpful. Let's see, visuals only. Okay, sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah,
I just didn't know
totally.
if you wanted to keep going.
Oh yeah, no, totally. That's great. Thank you.
Next slide.
Next slide. Thank you. I just wanted to address this question really quick. So should this part be visuals only? Thinking 35 minutes to talk about 2 projects. Yeah, it depends on your presentation style. You really want to talk through 2 whole projects. You might have some of that mapping in there that you did. You also might have some like research findings, but yeah, like heavy focus on the visuals, less text. You should probably be like speaking most of what you want to say and using the slides to illustrate stuff that you were doing. And iterations are great. Okay, so yeah, like I was saying, prepare a deck, guide with the visuals. So like definitely visuals first. Be quick with the problem framing. Feel free to turn off your presentation when you're just like talking with a person, because it can be really like, Lauren has to do this right now and I have to do this sometimes, and I'm glad I don't have to do this, because having a presentation up while speaking to someone is just like so hard and distracting because Zoom sucks. This is another opportunity to prepare those few questions and like really don't throw out this opportunity. Like asking about collaboration on the team is fine, or like what a typical designer's day is fine, but think about like what you would really value in a job and like what you want and how that company's goals might align with yours. So we were talking about power structures earlier. So thinking about your opportunities to influence the direction a company's going, about your growth, about how an individual designer feels connected to the mission, things like that. Like ask the hard stuff. That's totally fine. And then we can go into the next slide. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One more thing I'll just add to this one. I actually had an interview screen this morning. We have a new grad role at Cruise, and this might seem like a no-brainer, but if you're using a service that you are not familiar with, like for example, we use Google Meet at work. I can use Zoom, I can find my way around, but it's not something I use every day or I'm super used to. So with Google Meets, I couldn't hear her. And then once we got it so I could hear her, then there was another issue. What was the second issue? I couldn't hear her. Oh, and then she couldn't figure out how to share. Oh, because she hadn't like allowed permissions for Google Meets to like be able to share her screen. So just like log into whatever service you're going to be presenting, do a practice run, and just make sure all that stuff works first. And like because of that, we started the interview 10 minutes late. And so I wouldn't like dock her because of that, but you know, it's 10 less minutes that she has.
Yeah, anything you can do to put your best foot forward. It's exhausting, but helpful. Okay, so then with these take-home exercises, not a lot of places are doing this. I honestly think this might be a relief in a pandemic to like have more places do this, but it doesn't necessarily actually reflect how a person would do in a real work environment, because the conditions are so different. Like you're not really working with anyone. So I personally am suspicious when companies do this and would evaluate the exercise, the contents of the exercise, and see like how that relates to their business proposition versus is just an assessment of your skills. In case they're like trying to get free work, like some startups do. That's like real sketchy. So watch out for that. But like legit companies like Airbnb will do a design challenge. It's often for new grad roles because there isn't a ton of portfolio work. So again, that can be a really good thing. Some tips about these. I had a friend take an entire week off of work in order to like do this. Don't do that. They'll say like do this in 4 hours. Spend the amount of time that you think it will take to get the project done, but keep yourself moving. So we're going to practice a design exercise later. I think some of the learnings from that, or like how you approach that, will be helpful for design exercises too, because thinking like that just helps keep you moving and helps keep you making decisions about a project. And that's like really important. Is just to like do the whole thing and then talk about how you got there. Doesn't actually matter what the content is really. Okay, and then last, is the cover letter. So this is again like the about me section. Like it's pretty important, but not like the thing that people are going to spend the most time on. Again, this is an opportunity to show your personality, like put your personality in there. If there's some driving motivation for your life, if you like to think about weird stuff in your free time, it's not just hobbies, like try and put an essential piece of yourself in this cover letter. And yeah, so we can just look at one example of a cover letter that I pulled off the internet. So this one's probably as long as you want it to be. And if we can just slide onto the next slide. Thanks. So there's like an overview and interest section that kind of overlaps into expertise. There's like 2 sections of expertise, which like if there's some better way to format that so it's skimmable, that is great. People love skimmable stuff, especially in a cover letter, and they also love buzzwords. So like that'll take care of that. And then why you're excited can just be like a sentence that you swap out based on the company that you're looking at. And try and think about like Like, for example, a lot of people applying to Facebook would say, I'm excited because Facebook is so big and touches so many people in the world. Like, okay, that's great. A lot of companies do that. What about this particular mechanism, or like what facet of the business, or like what skill are you looking to learn? So like be specific with that if possible. And that's it. Now we will talk about the onsite.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. Cool. Now we're going to get into the onsite. So yeah, going over these onsites are normally, usually like half a day. I mean, give or take, depending on the company. They could be a full day. They could be a little bit less. But these are 4 parts that I've seen. So presentation, cross-functional one-on-one. So having one-on-ones with people, a lunch or tour, and then a collaborative exercise. So we'll go through all of them. And Janani, I don't know if I said your name right, but we'll get to that question at the end, if that's okay. I just saw in the chat. Cool. Okay, so what to expect? So for the presentation part, so about 45 minutes to an hour presentation in a conference room that looks kind of like this, with about 3 to 10 people. A lot of the times it's cross-functional, so it's not just design, it could be PMs, there could be an end representative as well. Sometimes all the questions are held to the end. So I've seen it it's kind of been half and half. Like sometimes they're like, this is your time, you present. We're going to try to hold questions until we have our one-on-ones with you later, because you usually have your one-on-ones later with these same people. Sometimes, even though they say that, clarifying questions might come up, but there's not going to be any super big questions. But I've also had it where it's expected and they want it to be more conversational and they want to ask questions throughout. So I would just say be prepared for both. Sometimes they tell you ahead of time which one they are or they want to do, and sometimes it's like a little bit of both. So just be flexible throughout the presentation, because both might happen. Again, presentation, I'm not going to go over this again because we've already talked about it, but it's all this stuff just in more depth. So a couple tips. Practice, fill your time, don't rush. I've had presentations end like 15 minutes early, and then it's kind of like, okay, what now? Kind of awkward. So make sure you have enough to fill your time, but also like don't rush. So just practice and to get the timing right. Guide with visuals in the presentation. You can talk about things, parts of the process and your designs, but actually kind of showing them visually just kind of creates that understanding between what you're trying to say quicker, because it's visual. So it just kind of makes things easier to understand and makes things go a little bit faster. So when you can, make things visual. Keep an eye on your audience, be flexible if questions come up, like I just said. Bring computer adapters just in case to plug into HDMI cords, whatever. They will probably have one and you'll be fine, but just in case, I would bring one. Don't rely on Wi-Fi to do anything via the web, like go to your website. I would have a hard copy of something, a deck that you go through. Sometimes they'll let you connect to Wi-Fi, but what if it's not working? It might take a while. Just don't even have to deal with that and just like have the hard copy. Try to face your audience. So I included this picture here. This is something I try to do. So usually you kind of go into the room where you're presenting with the recruiter and they kind of welcome you. You walk into the room and they're like, get settled in, plug in. You have like 10 minutes before the presentation. That's kind of usually what happens. And so you can kind of pick where you sit. I usually try to sit at the front of the table near the presentation screen. And then that way I can kind of like turn my body and my computer so I'm facing everyone else. And that way I can look at my screen while I'm presenting and not as much the presentation on the wall. So I'm kind of facing them and it's more of a conversation, something I try to do. Then getting into one-on-one. So what to expect, this could be anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour with 1 to 2 people. And depending on the one-on-one, some companies have like an objective for each person that has a one-on-one. So let's say the presentation was with 5 people, and then you have these one-on-ones with each of the 5 people after that. Somebody could get like, you're gonna work deep dive. And so what you're going to do in the one-on-one is like go through the stuff they shared in the presentation deeper. Some people, their objective could be like, I learn more about like their background and their experience, ask about like, the technical skills they have, ask about the exposure to different roles or processes, stuff like that. Another role I've seen is just behavior and values. So stuff like, what do you do when, and more about, I guess, like collaboration and processes and stuff like that. Usually each one-on-one, they leave time for you to ask questions at the end. So come with questions. I find that that's a great time just to get to know the people better and their processes, and also ask them, hey, what are you looking for in this designer role that you're hiring for? Especially if it's like a PM or an engineer, what are you looking for? What would be the ideal like way to collaborate with a designer? So you can get a better sense of that. And then they feel like listened to and thought of, because you want to know, like, you know, what are they looking for? Yeah, so tips, just, you know, make it conversational, relax, make sure you've got questions for them. But like, make sure you ask the questions when the time is right. Usually they come in with an agenda and they'll have questions. And usually towards the end is when you get a chance to ask more of your questions. And I would also say, take time to like think and respond thoughtfully. You know, I've been in interviews, you know, more than once where you ask a question and they feel like they need to respond right away. And so sometimes the response isn't so thoughtful or doesn't make sense. So if you need to think about it for a second and then respond, do that. And if it makes your answer that much more intentional, you should do that. Lunch tour. So normally there's like some time allotted in for you to just have a little bit more of a break. Leah, did you want to add that? I saw you just said something in the chat. Did you want to say something? Or?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just like answering questions in the chat if we
Gotcha.
don't get to them. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no, thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is really just time, to be honest, to help you relax, answer questions about the company, talk about your experiences in and outside of work. The best experience I've had in these is when you like find a way to connect with the person. I know my interview at Cruise, I was interviewed by a guy and I was like wearing a ring and he was like, your ring is cool. And I was like, I made my ring. And he was like, oh my God, I like make metal sculptures. And then we started like, you know, talking and connecting on stuff. And not that you have to connect on a hobby, but you know, I think this is the time when, you know, you can talk about like how your day went and stuff outside of work. But again, take the lead of the interviewer if they go in that direction. Cool. Okay, now we're getting to the collaborative exercise. So I know this can be really nerve-wracking for a lot of people, me included, especially when I was first kind of getting onto the design team, but or seeing what to expect. So between 45 minutes to 1 hour is usually the time frame for this. And I've seen it done different ways. So I think the little bit more common thing I've seen is that you have 1 to 2 collaborators or facilitators in the room with you for the entirety of the session. Another way I've seen it, which I actually thought was like super cool and interesting, and if I ever like design an interview process, I would do it this way, is that you have 30 minutes with 4 collaborators where you kind of brainstorm user needs, and you're kind of given a packet of like, these are the user needs in quotes, and you're with 4 people and you like brainstorm ideas together, and it's this rapid fire brainstorm. And then they leave the room, you synthesize for 15 minutes and then present back out to them when they come in, like more of a finished flow. So those are all ways I've seen it done. I think the first one is more common, but the other one was interesting and fun. A little bit, just some tips on process. This is a general overview of a process to follow and things that you should look to try and cover. So they will normally start by giving you a prompt. So for example, we're redesigning the ATM experience is one I've seen. And so you want to make sure, you know, you set the context in the beginning. So you're leading this conversation. So you can use the whiteboard, and I'll get into that in a second, but, you know, what are you solving for? And what are the user objectives and user needs? And this can be collaborative. You can kind of talk to the facilitator, like, and kind of brainstorm, what are the needs? What are the problems? Talk about what the constraints are up front. Business objectives, if there are any. And then also like talk about like, okay, like if these are kind of, this is the big need, how do we measure success? And then you go into this like problem space definition phase where you kind of go a little bit more in depth on the user need, and you might brainstorm a few different needs or problems or workflows that you could solve, and to come up with like different things to consider, like product types or technology options. So like, for example, like, you know, is it an application? Is it a website? You know, is it a voice interface? Is it like an Alexa type thing? You know, is it a service where you go somewhere and do something? Do you mail something in? Blah, blah, or technology options like, using machine learning and stuff like that. And so from there, you go into brainstorming. So from there, you want to pick one of those user needs and, discuss with the facilitator, like which one we feel like has the most impact. So pick one of those. From there, you want to create flows. So build out the workflow and kind of wireframe the solution. And then after that, this is really 3 and 4 are like a little bit kind of back and forth, where as you're kind of creating these ideas, you're talking about pros and cons of the different ideas and wireframes you're making. And you're just kind of discussing trade-offs and making sure that you're covering user needs, the implications on the growth or the business model, and making sure that you can measure success. Cool. So that's a quick outline of process. This is an example that I found on an article online that I have a link to on the next page. But it shows potentially how you could divide up the board space. So, the first column is context, and then the next is problem space, and then the very last is the solution space. So I forgot to talk about timing, but spending about 10 on context, 10 on problem space. Most of the time you want to spend on the brainstorm and design, and then a little bit of like at the end of just like wrapping up stuff and talking about trade-offs and stuff like that is nice. Okay, so a bunch of tips on this. So you will be expected to guide the conversation in session, but you'll be nudged by the facilitator. So if they nudge you in a certain way or say, what about this or what about that, follow that nudge and take that nudge, and because they're trying to steer you in a direction that they like you to go in. If at the beginning these 3 things aren't clear, I think it's totally fine for you to ask. So what outcomes do you expect to see? How do we want to finish the session? What is the outcome? Do I want to see like, a wireframe flow of a solution to the problem? That could be an answer. How would you like to be engaged? Every company is a little bit different, and they might have different expectations going into this. Some people, I don't know, might want to be engaged in a different or less or more way than others. So it's okay to ask that. And then also, will you be playing a role? It says role, but I meant role. So I've had it times where, the facilitator acts as like the user. And in the beginning, when I'm setting up the context, I ask about their needs. Like one example was like design like a garden watering system. And I was like, how big is your yard? What plants do you have? What are your biggest problems? And the answer was like, when I go on vacation, my yard doesn't get watered. So kind of sometimes they can play the roles of different people and help you come up with the context and the problem solution. And sometimes you brainstorm and come up with that yourself in talking with them. Be flexible with your process. Again, if they nudge, kind of go where they're nudging you. Don't worry too much about having like the most innovative idea. They just want to see that, you've covered all those parts of the process, and that you're someone who, can be flexible and can collaborate. Be visual. I would try to use the whiteboard throughout the entire process. It creates alignment when you make things visual and write things down. There's alignment between you and the facilitator about decisions, and so I'd be visual as much as possible. Vocalize your thoughts. I have been in some where the interviewee kind of stops talking for a little while, which sometimes you need to stop talking if you're like wireframing. I mean, sometimes it's fine, but don't stop talking for too long, and you lose that kind of collaboration and connection with the facilitator, and they may not know what you're thinking or what direction you're going in. And then I included an article that Leah found, which is awesome and has some other great tips that you should check out. Cool. So I'm going to talk about a few examples here, and then we're going to get into a quick exercise. So these are some examples that I've seen in interview situations. I've talked about a few of them. One that I will call out is just the one at the very bottom. This was actually a small startup, and I was like, oh, this product sounds interesting. Maybe I'll do some contract work. And I went and I did an interview, and they had this collaborative exercise. And it was a product around like, it was like an Uber for therapy. And so people could like sign up and be a therapist, and you could like talk to people, which sounds a little shady and weird. But anyways, so their prompt was come up with some options for how to better hook our users on the product. And I just want to pull this out because this was a little bit of a red flag for me. Well, one, small startup, the people that were running this weren't designers. So I I won't fault them, but this was a bit of a red sign or red flag to me that they might not understand the design process. And so if I were to take in this job, I would want to make sure that they would be open to the design process. So for example, the reason why this prompt wasn't great is because, you know, nowhere in here does it talk about the user need. It just talks about wanting to like hook the user on a product, which is something, you know, you have to think about engagement when designing a product totally. But that should be kind of like secondary. You need to make sure you're kind of solving a need as well. So I just wanted to call that out, that not every company knows how to give these exercises. Actually, the first job that I got out of grad school, the people that were giving the interview and I was doing my collaborative exercise with had never done the exercise before. So, you know, sometimes, you know, you're in it together and sometimes they're kind of learning as well. All right, I do want to pause there and see if there are any questions about this exercise in general. But what we're going to do is do an exercise. I want everybody to get a piece of paper and some kind of pen or marker. And we are going to split our group into two groups. I'll facilitate one, Leah will do the other. And we're going to have one volunteer for each group to be the interviewee. But I want to reiterate that this will be a fun experience and we're not interviewing you. And we will in no way judge you throughout this entire thing. And we're going to kind of take pauses and breaks along the way as we go to talk about tips and tricks as we go. So if you are the volunteer, don't worry about like doing the right thing at all. So I guess any questions in general about doing a collaborative exercise, and then also any about the exercise, if you have any, please let us know. Cool. Oh, I guess the other thing too, I had another PDF that has this slide on it for you guys. So if whoever, you know, as we're doing the exercise, you guys can reference this for help along the way. So
I will throw that in the Slack. And just let me know when, sorry, did you want to go over the exercise and then do the breakout, or breakout now and then go over it?
I think we can break out now. I think Leah and I will each pick a topic. And we can go right into it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Give me 1 second and I'll set those up.
Oh, I guess, and also the other thing, we're going to try and, we were going to do 20 minutes. We're going over a little bit. Leah, do you still want to do 20 or do you want to try and do 15?
Let's try and do 15.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll come back at 12:45.
You know, to save time, I'm just gonna go automatically into 2, and by some chance, Lauren, if you're in the same, I'll reassign one of you to the other. So it'll just be faster this way.
Sounds good.
1 second, thank you. Oh my God. Did it work?
Oh, we beat him back, y'all.
We've been tricked.
I know. Okay, well, does anyone have any questions about like what we came up with while we're hanging out waiting for them?
I still haven't understood the real definition of a success metric. I know people keep on talking about it, but then when you're making these design decisions, can you give us one or two examples, let's say for this ATM experience, like what would be a good success metric, like apart from time or, I mean, how should it be? Like, should it be super specific or a broader metric?
I think it comes down to like the constraints that you originally had in the beginning. So Ashley's point about choosing students, like I think what we designed was a digital payment system rather than an ATM. And like, that's okay for this exercise. Like we found out that didn't work, we'd probably pivot. Oh, we're about to start. But like if an ATM's purpose is to give you cash, then a metric of success is like how many people are actually able to get cash out of an ATM, for example. Yeah, so it's based on your constraints that you set at the beginning. Sorry. Okay. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Cool. You guys did the ATM. Awesome. We did the drone delivery system. Awesome. I had a lot of fun doing that. I hope you guys had fun and maybe learned a thing or two. So I guess at this point, I have 7 more minutes. I don't know how much more time Leah has, but I can stick around until 1. Awesome. Leah can too. If you guys have any more questions about the collaborative exercise or really any part of the process or stuff that we've gone over today.
Yeah, I had one question. So
yep.
I was just wondering, is it usually like in this one, the brief is usually this one-line definition, or do they sometimes tend to give more details? Like, what are your users? What are your who do you have to design for? When you say system, are you referring to the system that's within the business or business to users, or is
Yeah, so I would say most of the time the prompts I've gotten have been pretty short, and part of the exercise is defining it more.
okay.
There was that one time that I was like given a little stapled packet of like, these are your user needs and these are user quotes. And then I kind of worked off of that. So I have seen that before, but I do think it's more common that part of the exercise is defining the problem and the use cases and the needs a little bit more. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Leah.
No, just to like reemphasize. So we went down a path and then decided that maybe that path was like not as clear as we thought it would be. If they give you a brief that's like a sentence, it's okay to do that. Like the process is iterative, and it's good to show that you're like willing to pivot or like consider other options if you run into something that feels less inspiring than another direction. So fear not. A short brief is a good brief still.
Cool.
I have a question about
question.
this. Oh, go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I just want to ask in follow-up of what Mahesh shared. Is it okay to question them of why that was the brief in terms of like, why was that a problem space that they're looking to address in terms of, again, like for this example, the drone delivery, why was that required? Like, is that something we can ask in the starting phases?
I think that I would say no, just because the prompt is, it's this exercise is so open and there's so many things that you need to define. And so that is one thing that's already defined for you. And so I think opening it up larger than that is kind of a can of worms. Right. And the like why are we designing a drone? Like that needs to be figured out, and it's part of the exercise.
Right. Thank you.
Also, ideally, it won't relate directly to their business goals. That's kind of the example that Lauren gave earlier of the prompt that might be a red flag for you. You don't necessarily want them giving you something that's like free work for their company. It's about how you think.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I have a question about the whiteboard challenge as well. What are the key things are they looking for in us? Like how we communicate, how we collaborate, or how we think? Like what are the things you think we should keep in mind when we are working through this session? And how do we balance that ratio of actually, brainstorming together with them versus performing?
Yeah, good questions. I hid this slide, so do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
I didn't cover this, but hopefully this answers some of the like what we're looking for. So, collaboration and teamwork, like, is this somebody who like, takes feedback or takes my nudges and kind of builds off of that? And product thinking, are they balancing the business goals with user needs? Problem solving skills, are they user centered? Do they start with the needs? Are they defining the use cases, creating workflows, discussing trade-offs? And then just like leadership and drive, like, are they able to drive a structured and clear conversation? There's a lot of just being able to navigate ambiguity and just, being proactive. So hopefully that helps a little bit with the first question. What was your next question? I don't remember.
I was asking, how do we balance it between, actually performing or, trying to be more, like performative? Like is it performative or is it more collaborative? Like where does that balance of focus lie on?
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was struggling with that when I was like put on the spot at that point of time. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to perform, if I was supposed to actually, have a rapport going on.
And actually, just before, sorry, Lauren, but just before you answer that, I wanted to build on what I was trying to ask earlier, which I felt a similar anxiety about that, which is the line between asking more questions, but also assuming certain things. And, like, is there any advice around that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious if Leah has more to add to this, but I would say like brainstorm use cases, brainstorm needs, brainstorm constraints, but always allow for feedback. So you should be you should be driving the content, but leave room for feedback and new content to be added or kind of edited. I don't know if you'd have anything to add to that, Leah.
No, I think it's really like whatever you want it to be. Like, feel free, like make it about you. They're there to like make your experience good. So if you want to ask questions, if you want to be collaborative, if you just want to like run the show, that's fine. Like, be receptive to what they're trying to give you, but like do it your style. That's totally fine. If you want to start with a bunch of questions, go for it. Yeah, but like
I had another question about the two challenges that were given to the two teams. Our team did something on the redesigning of ATM machine, and the second team did something around drone delivery system, which I was thinking that I personally don't know anything about, and there would be people who have not really experienced a few briefs firsthand. So like redesigning an ATM feels like something which we're all aware of because we've used ATMs in our daily lives. So if there's a brief like that, which is very specific to a problem which I might not have experienced or even know about, then what do you do in such cases?
So I think the drone one is probably a little bit more whimsical in nature. I think it leaves room for you to figure out and design the use cases, but you really need to do it in both scenarios. So like with an ATM, like, why am I going to the ATM? When am I going to the ATM? What are my goals for getting out money? What do I want to do after I take money out of the ATM? What am I trying to do before? And I think it's the same thing with the drone. You know, let's say, you know, the prompt is like, you know, we're like a big company, we do deliveries and we want to expand into drone delivery to like, you know, make our options that we have as a company like quicker or faster or, you know, more accessible, whatever it is. So does that answer your question?
So again, I was wondering that the key difference that I see between the two briefs is that I have used a machine and I know what happens with the machine, and that experience is lived once or twice or a number of times. But like specifically for a drone delivery system, like I wouldn't even know how the current system works. And I'm assuming that it's true for many people who have not really owned drones or like bought drones. So in that case, what assumption? So what can I start with? Like what information can I start with? Because the first few minutes would probably just be a lot of questions that I'll be asking the team.
I guess I would say, I think Leah had to drop off. She has a meeting. I think I've got to go too. So I think the facilitator probably doesn't have a lot of experience with a drone either. And so I think you're both working with that experience together. And I think even though you don't have experience with it, the general idea of, you know, I think that's part of what you need to solve. Like, you know, I work at Cruise, we're working on autonomous vehicles. No one really has experience with autonomous vehicles. It's a problem that we're solving for the first time. And that's a thing that you have to deal with sometimes and work around. So, you know, it's something that try to make it collaborative. And, you know, how do you drop a package? We didn't get into the solution phase in our exercise, but like once you get to like they've already ordered the thing, they're waiting for the thing, like, do you set a time? Do you like unfold like a little like loading dot, or like do you put out like a target and they drop it on the target? Like you know, it hasn't really been designed before, so design that together with them.
Good. Thank you.
Cool. All right, I have to go, guys.
I know we do. Lauren, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I think everyone got a ton out of it. And just, Lauren, drop off if you have to. But before everyone else drops, Francis, if you could just give a quick line about your session next week. I know you're here today. That would be excellent. We've got 2 awesome ones next week. Actually, maybe Josh could jump in too. And then we'll let you all go.
I am muted. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I've just been like lurking in this session, so thanks for letting me join. I'm Francis. I was from C4. I'm working at Microsoft right now, and Macy and I are leading a workshop on November 5th, I believe, next week. Continuing this design interview, prepping for the design interview and nailing the interview process. So please come. We got a lot of insight too about what you guys are interested in. So thanks for filling out the survey. But yeah, hope to see you guys there.
Awesome. Okay, I know we're a little bit over. Thank you, Francis. We're so excited for next week. And thank you all for showing up. I hope this was helpful, and we have so much more planned. So really excited to see everyone next week and keep this up. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.